Welcome back to the Brew Bucks podcast. My name is Jacob.
And I'm Alec.
On this podcast, we interview successful entrepreneurs, personal finance creators, speakers, authors, real estate experts, and everything in between.
We'd like to keep things casual here by cracking a beer with our guests at the beginning of every show. There's nothing quite like having a conversation with your friend while sipping on a cold brew.
If you're looking to learn more about money and entrepreneurship, all while having some fun along the way, this is the podcast for you. Welcome back to episode number 38 of the Brew Bucks podcast. We're back, buddy, from winter break. How we doing?
It feels good. Finally done with the holidays. It was a nice little break we had from the podcast. As much as I missed it, it was kind of nice not having to wake up early and do it once in a while. But it feels good to be back. How are your holidays?
It was good, man. We decided to skip presents as a family this year and do a little trip to Maui instead.
Ooh.
So we got that coming up here next week, which is exciting.
And I'm gonna guess you travel hacked the whole trip.
We did. So we decided that we were gonna really tap into a lot of like our Hyatt points, and we ended up spending about 125,000 Hyatt points. The wife and I pulled some together to be able to book some nights at the Hyatt Regency Maui for not only us but the parents as well. So really excited about that, and I think the entire trip would have cost somewhere around like $6,000, and we were able to again use points to pretty much cover the entire thing. So I think we're just really at this point as a family where like giving gifts is really awesome, especially if it's like out of the blue and not necessarily even just for an occasion. Like, oh, I really feel like my friend so and so would like this gift, or oh, my mom would like this. Like, I'm gonna snag it and give it to him, you know. But when there's so much like pressure around Christmas shopping that I just feel like is unnecessary sometimes, it just kind of becomes almost more work and kind of this just like process rather than this enjoyable thing. And so we decided, hey, we're going to just do a family vacation this year, and we're really focused on just trying to spend more time as a family and, enjoy each other's company rather than the materialistic present type things, and we're at that point where if we want something, we're just going to buy it anyways, so why do we need to put all this pressure around buying presents and stuff when we can do something fun like a family trip together?
That sounds much better too. It sounds like a week-long Christmas too. You just gonna hang out with your family, go to the beach, do whatever you want. I mean, that sounds better than just a few hours. Everybody's stressing out over cooking, stressing out what they got each other. So
yeah,
nice.
totally.
Yeah, I had a great Christmas. It was awesome. My family did spend money on presents for each other, unfortunately. Maybe next year I'll try to push off the Hawaii trip. I think the only fun part about Christmas now is I have a niece and a nephew, and I enjoy buying presents for them. Like, who doesn't want to go out and buy Legos and stuff like that? Like, it's the Christmas spirit is for the kids, but once everybody's kind of grown up, it's hard.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I'm sure this is probably the cheapest December bill for your credit card you've had in years, I'm guessing.
Yeah, that part's true.
Yeah,
for sure.
so I'm kind of jealous of that. But yeah, it was great times with the family. I do love the holidays. I try to get in the holiday spirit, so it's always a good time. But now we're back to real life and doing the podcast, and I love it.
Yeah, I love it. This is our second interview that's going to be our second episode that's going to be out on YouTube. So make sure to click the link in the bio and say what's up. See our faces, watch us drink the beer, and interact with Coach Carson. This is our first interview that's going to be full length, all video on YouTube. So come check us out, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. Leave something in the comments, like it, share it. Do whatever, do whatever you can to help support the show. And like we've said many times before, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please leave us a comment or a review. 5 stars would be much appreciated, and it really helps us grow the podcast and continue to reach not only more people, but when we go out and ask guests to be on the show, it really helps to see that the show has a high rating, and so we can get high quality guests on here for you guys to listen to. So really goes a long way, and it means the world to us when we get those.
Takes 2 seconds. 5 stars. We'll type up a quick review.
Boom.
2 seconds.
Done. We don't have a question of the week this week. We thought we'd just kind of get back into the groove of things, do a little housekeeping, and get back to it. But if you guys do have questions, once again, in the show notes, there's a link where you can fill it out and submit your questions, and we will answer them on the air.
So who's our first guest today since winter break?
Our first guest since winter break is going to be Chad Carson, also known as Coach Carson. And he wrote the book, How to Retire Early with Real Estate. And it's a Bigger Pockets published book. I've read it. It's awesome. He talks all about how really someone can build a pretty small portfolio that provides enough cash flow for you to be able to retire early. He's retired early. He's living in Spain for however long he wants because he can, and took his family there and is just living life, you know. And he talks a lot about being able to put yourself in a position where you can keep the first very most important things in your life really in front of you and making those your number one priorities. And I really enjoyed that piece. He's super knowledgeable. You can tell he's really got that coaching spirit. He talks a lot about like his method of coaching where he's like in the backyard, kind of pretending like he's like doing little league with a whiteboard, and his YouTube videos are super entertaining too. So really great, knowledgeable guy, and super excited to share the story with you guys.
Yeah.
So without further ado, here's Coach Carson. Chad, or Coach Carson, as many people might know you by. Thank you so much for coming on and taking some time to hang out with us today. Super excited to talk to you.
Absolutely. It's great to be here. Thanks for the invitation, and looking forward to talking and drinking a little beer.
Yeah.
It's the best part about it. So, yeah, and Chad, excited to hear you. I know you got a great story, so audience is going to love you today.
Yeah, all the way from Spain. It's 8:30 here, but it's 5 o'clock somewhere, and that is in Spain. So,
so we're allowed to drink at 8:30 a.m.
Nothing wrong with a breakfast beer. So as you might know, Chad, we're going to start off each show by talking about what type of brew we will be sipping on. Whether it's a nice cup of coffee or an ice cold beer, there's something different about having a conversation with a drink in your hand. Our goal is to be able to provide some interviews and conversations with awesome guests while not taking ourselves too seriously, and most importantly, having some fun along the way. So, Alec, you've got a holiday beer, it looks like, today.
I do have a holiday beer, but before I get into that, I want to bring back the joke of the day. So let's see. I think I got a joke for us today. So.
He hasn't run this by me yet.
Why did the little boy eat his cash?
Why?
Because it was his dinner money.
Oh my god!
Oh man,
terrible. See, the jokes get better once I start drinking. So, what am I drinking today? It is a holiday beer, like Jake said. And it is called the Mad Elf. It is brewed by Troegs, located. I think that's how you say it. Troegs, located in Pennsylvania. Actually, Hershey, Pennsylvania, and it is an ale brewed with cherry and honey.
Is that where Hershey's is from?
Yeah, Hershey, Pennsylvania. Yep.
Oh,
yeah, so they got the whole amusement park for them and everything there. So it's fun. I've never been. I've just heard. But let's give this a try. It's 11% ABV. So I'm not sure how I feel about this at 8:30 a.m., but wish me luck.
Looks like cola.
That is deceivingly smooth for 11% ABV. Like, that is not boozy at all. Very strong notes of cherry and just like a hint of honey. But it is very good. I would highly recommend this.
Cool. I'm more of a Celebration guy, you know. Sierra Nevada, that's my favorite beer by them. Celebration.
Right now.
So today I am drinking. Let's see. Alec brought me a Pilsner by Trillium out of Canton, Massachusetts. It's 4.7%. Nice, beautiful straw color. Let's give it a taste. Definitely what I'd prefer to drink in the morning, rather than an 11% beer. Lots of notes of like whole grain bread, little sweet, but nice crisp finish, just like a Pilsner is supposed to be. So I heard Trillium's doing pretty awesome things. So
oh yeah, no, Trillium's been killing it. So
yeah, thanks, buddy.
Chad, what have you got over there?
All right. So I actually went to Germany from Spain. I didn't go there literally, but I went to my local store, and I like German beers. I studied there in college. So this one's actually not one of the traditional ones. Though. This is like one of their new local brews. It's called the Schneider's Bayerisch Hell. And it's from Bavaria, 4.9% alcohol, and it's a Helles style beer. So it's good.
Heck yeah. Right on. Well, thanks for coming on again and sharing a drink with us. Cheers.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
So let's kick off this interview, Chad. Sounds like you've been pretty well traveled your whole life, it sounds like. But let's back things up a little bit and kind of start from the beginning. How did you what was growing up like for you, specifically around the area money?
Yeah, I grew up in Noonan, Georgia, so it's outside of Atlanta, kind of metro Atlanta, and everybody's got different starting point. Mine was a pretty good starting point in terms of money. I mean, my parents were both upper middle class. My mom was a dentist, so she made good money as a dentist, and my dad actually got in. He was a computer programmer for a while. Had his own. He was always an entrepreneur, doing his own thing, and he got into real estate investing. So, a topic we'll talk about a lot. And when I was like probably 6th grade, 7th grade. He would have these rental properties that he would buy, and he would either buy them at a foreclosure sale or just, they were always fixer uppers. And he would drop me and my brother off there during the summer, and we were not that good at workers, just to give you that disclaimer. And he would drop us off there and say, hey, all right, guys, clean up this house or paint these walls or whatever. We would complain and moan about it, and everybody else is swimming at the pool and we're painting houses. But it was so I hated real estate, like in middle school, thinking this is crazy, who would do this. But it was a good education in a way, just seeing how he did that, and seeing that he was an entrepreneur, seeing he was always at my practices and coaching. And so just very involved dad. And for me, that was a pretty cool role model, an example to see, all right, one of these days, I didn't initially want to go into real estate, but it came back around eventually.
It's got to be hard painting walls as a kid and stuff, but I'm sure definitely down the line it looks like at least it paid off for sure. So that's cool.
Paid off for his dad too, free labor. So.
He might have even paid us, but whatever he paid us, it was too much, whatever it was.
That's funny. So I mean, after that, did you ever do any little side gigs? Did you ever do like little lemonade stands or go mow lawns or anything like that to kind of do your own businesses?
Not as much. I was like a sports guy, and I still do like sports. And so I would play baseball, I would play football. I was always playing sports. And I think my deal with my parents was that if I was making good grades and always playing, involved in something, then I could kind of substitute that for the earning the money at a job in high school or middle school. So I never did that, but I was always interested in it. Like I loved the idea of entrepreneurship, and in a way, like I played football in college and got a scholarship. So it was like, I was aware of the money and the fact that, hey, this is what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, playing football, and they're paying for my scholarship, and they would give us the stipend to pay for our housing, and always try to like maximize that and figure out which rental would be get the most value for the money. So I didn't have like a traditional job, but entrepreneurship was always in the back of my head. And to me, it's a lot like a sport. It's a game, which is why I really like playing it. I like you're keeping score. Money's just a point system, and it happens to be pretty helpful for life as well. But that's still the way I look at it today. It's just a really fun game.
That's a great comparison. I love that. Where'd you go to college at?
Clemson University, so South Carolina. So I went up the road, up I-85 from Clemson, from Atlanta, and I went to school there and played football as a middle linebacker. Like I said, paid for school. And then after I was done, I went back to Atlanta for about a year, but decided that I didn't like the metro life and the traffic and all that. So I moved back to the small town of Clemson, and that's been my home base ever since.
Nice. And what did you major in when you went to college?
It was a biology major and a German minor. So that was, if you look at my background experience for real estate, getting started after that, I could basically tell you the species of tree in the front yard at the houses I was looking at, and I could translate that to German. I could drink a German beer. That's about all I had. But
that's awesome. Are you fluent in German?
I was. Ich war. Yes, Nick.
I think Brusta, isn't that cheers in German? That's about all I know.
Prost. Prost is cheers.
Prost.
Yeah.
That's got to help traveling around Europe and stuff, right? That's awesome. Cool. So it sounds like you kind of learned the power of, or learned about real estate from a young age. When did you kind of, I guess, truly grasp like the power of real estate, and what were the early days of investing in real estate like for you?
Yeah, so when I graduated from college, I still had in the back of my head, I actually tried to go to the NFL with football, but that didn't work out. So that was kind of like, all right, let me try that out. That didn't work out. And so I pivoted, and I was still thinking I was going to go with my biology major and go to medical school, but I just wanted to take a break. I was just kind of tired from all the football stuff. And so I decided to try out being an entrepreneur with real estate just for a year or two, thinking that, all right, I'll learn a few skills, I'll make a little bit of money, then I'll go back and get a real career after that. But after doing that year, I was basically a bird dog I went back to my dad to Noonan, Georgia for a year. And being a bird dog means you go out and just find deals for somebody else who has the money. And so I didn't have any money to buy deals. I didn't have any credit. I was living at home, but I figured out what he was looking for in terms of rental properties and flips. He was flipping houses at the time. And then I would go talk to realtors. I would send direct mail. I would knock on doors. I just got really aggressive on one little part of the real estate business, finding deals. And it made me a little bit of money that year. I was able to save a bunch of it because I was living at home. And then after a year, that's when I moved back up to South Carolina to Clemson. And a friend and I decided to start on our own and do our own business. And so we kind of took what I learned from that, and we started buying houses and flipping them in the second year of our business. And that was it. Once we started, I did that for about a year and a half. I decided that this is pretty fun. I don't have a job. I don't have a boss. I can, it's pretty exciting. It's like sports, like I mentioned earlier, it's a challenge. And I realized about myself, one of the big motivators for me is flexibility and freedom. So the money is great, but it's the options you get with the money. And even from an early stage of being an entrepreneur, I wasn't making a ton of money, but I could set my own schedule. I could set my own goals. I didn't have to go to time wasting meetings that other people were setting. I could dictate my own life. And once I got a taste of that, there was no going back. I basically decided this is for me. I'm going to keep doing it.
I love it. I know we're going to jump in a ton more to that topic of just having complete control over your time through real estate. But couple follow-up questions first. What did you find was like your best technique as a bird dog? Like what was I guess providing you the most amount of deals? And then what did your first deal kind of on your own look like?
Yeah, the deal, there's a ton of different ways I found deals. Some of them still are the same today though. So like the tried and true for me, the MLS, although it goes up and down in terms of how effective it is, that's how I found my first couple of deals for my dad, was just looking on the MLS and searching pretty hard. But then I would kind of take it a step further, actually build relationships with some of the realtors, the listing agents. So I met a really nice guy who's from my local town where I was, and he was an entrepreneur. He owned a restaurant. He was also a realtor. But I just got to know him and just went and talked to him some. And the first listing I called on wasn't a deal, but I told him what we were looking for and that we had cash and we were ready to buy houses. And he sent me another listing that he didn't even have on the MLS yet. And we ended up making an offer on that and buying it. So realtors are great sources of leads. I've heard different stats, but I think 85 to 90% of all properties that are sold through agents, even today. So you don't want to discount that. You always want to work the MLS and work relationships with real estate agents first, because that's an inexpensive way to get started. So that's number one. That's still, I think it goes up and down in terms of how many deals you can find, but that's always number one. And the number two thing I did that year, which I still do today and recommend to people, is driving for dollars. Just going out in a neighborhood, picking your farm area. And I like to walk for dollars or jog for dollars or ride bikes for dollars, just to get some exercise while I'm doing it. But if you look for vacant houses, rundown houses, for sale by owners, for rent by owners, and you do it systematically around the neighborhoods that you want to buy in, there's always hidden opportunities there that nobody even knows about. And if you're willing to pursue them, talk to sellers, talk to neighbors, really get out in the neighborhoods, there's never a shortage of deals doing that.
So when you're doing that, do you just get out of your car, go knock on the door, and you'll talk directly to the owner?
Yeah, well, yes, sometimes, yes, and that's a little uncomfortable, if you haven't ever done that. But often these houses are vacant, and so you're looking for the best deals are the ones that somebody's moved out of. They're vacant. Maybe as a landlord who's just evicted a tenant, and you see a bunch of stuff piled on the road. Maybe it's somebody who inherited a house and they're, the house is in Georgia, but they live in California and they want to sell the house. Maybe it's a foreclosure and the bank's taking it back. There's all sorts of situations, but you're looking for those situations where there's a problem with the house that could indicate that there's some kind of motivation or problem with the homeowner too. And so your job as the investor is to help solve that problem for a profit. You're looking to get a deal on the property, of course, but if it's a fixer upper or if it's something that has some other kind of issues, you can buy that property from them, buy it quickly, and still be a win-win for everybody.
That's great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Driving for dollars.
So, eventually you kind of went on to write a book called How to Retire Early from Real Estate. Can you kind of talk about that a little bit and what made you decide to actually retire early with real estate?
Yeah, I mean, let's fast forward from that first year or two, because I was just a young entrepreneur just trying to make $20,000 and put some food on the table the first year or two. And so I think everybody starts somewhere, right? And I had the benefit and really the leg up, because I had a family member who could help teach me. So that's always a benefit, right? So you got to finding mentors, finding relationships. If you don't have a family member, getting in relationships with other people through networking, through local meetup groups, through just people at work who you find to do that. I think that was having him as a mentor, but also other people I met along the way was a big deal. And part of as I progressed, and my business partner and I went from flipping houses to buying rental properties, one of the goals we always had in the back of our head was we have fun doing this. We like the active part of the business, but ultimately the big allure of real estate is that you can do a lot of work up front and then have a relatively passive source of regular income on the back end. And so that doesn't happen overnight with rental properties. It's not a get rich quick kind of thing. But 10 years later is very, very reasonable, 5 to 10 years later, that if you buy some good properties and they're in good locations, then a very small, I call it a small and mighty portfolio. You don't have to have a huge portfolio of 1,000 units. You can have 5 properties, 10 properties, even a couple properties if you do them right. And those properties, as they mature, like a grapevine, or a good tree, fruit tree, it matures over time, and then those rental properties produce fruit, which is the monthly income, the monthly cash flow. And so that's what the book that I wrote was all about. It was sort of a strategy guide. I was very interested and still involved in the financial independence, retire early community. And it's less about, hey, I want to go retire at 35 and do nothing for the rest of my life. It's more about everybody I've met who's interested in that is more about, I want to dictate my schedule. I like being productive. I like working. I like contributing to society. But I want to do it in a way that doesn't deal with all the BS. I don't want to have like I mentioned earlier, the meetings that are kind of a waste of time, or if I have a boss or a situation that's not ideal for me. I like to have the financial leverage to say, hey, here's how I am willing to work in this situation. If you like that, great. If you don't, fine. I'll go find something else. And it's an amazing phenomenon how you can negotiate, how it's all negotiable. My wife had an example. She was a Spanish teacher at a local community college. And even in 2009, before we had really achieved financial independence, it was right in the middle of the Great Recession, but we had some, wealth accumulated, a little bit of cash flow coming in, some money in the bank. And we decided to take a 4-month trip where we went to South America and just took our backpacks, and actually Spain and South America. And we just traveled around. That's when I learned to speak Spanish. And she negotiated with her work. She thought she was going to lose her job or have to quit. She went in there and asked her boss and said, I would love to have my job when I get back next January, but we're going to take off and go on a trip for the fall. Is that okay? And the boss, her supervisor, was like, oh my God, I was worried you were going to quit. Like, yeah, that's fine. We're happy to have you back. And would you like health insurance while you're gone? We're like, she's like, yes, that'd be great. So, so I guess the point of that is that financial independence as a destination is more about making life negotiable, making options negotiable. And you can do that with a couple properties. You can do that and ultimately eventually having enough properties that pay all of your bills. And that's what my book was about. What's the strategy to get to that point? How do you start with house hacking or some other kind of starter plan? And what's the way to build enough wealth that you eventually live off the income? And then how do you do that? How do you actually live off the income in a way that doesn't run out for the rest of your life and that you can continue to grow and flourish, for 30, 40, 50 years down the road.
So did you own a few properties during the recession back in 2008?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We owned too many properties, and we actually, it's probably a longer story we can get into if you want, but in 2007, we had 33 acquisitions closings. We tried to go big. We heard that somebody said you should 10X things and go big or go home. And we try to kind of copy that a little bit, like, okay, let's go big. And that's the way to make build wealth. And so we got good at finding properties, but we did it in 2007, right before everything happened. And so we did some things wrong by some of those deals where we made mistakes on, had negative cash flow, but a lot of them are really good deals. But we had to sort of hold on for dear life in 2009 and 10, or 8, 9, and 10, just to make sure, we ate into some of those reserves when tenants lost their jobs. We had some properties we underestimated repairs on. It was just harder to liquidate properties. We had to shift our whole business model. So we had about 55 units, I think, at that point. And it's me and a business partner, by the way. So mine's half of that. And so we were able to survive though. And there's a whole story, a lot of details of how that worked out. Some of it's a little bit of luck. Some of it was, we just had a big cash reserves. We didn't spend all of our money from 2006 and 7. But we got through 2007, 8, and 9. And on the other side of that, there's a ton of opportunities. There was a lot of good buying opportunities, and that sort of allowed us to have some fresh snow there to ski in with a lot of deals and not as many investors left over.
Yeah. Were you primarily buying kind of close to home, or were you buying out of state? Kind of where were the majority of these properties?
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate that we could buy locally. So we used to, when we flipped houses, we were all in the upstate of South Carolina, which is kind of hubbed by Greenville, Spartanburg. So it's a smaller metro area, smaller city, really amazing downtown area in Greenville, and it's halfway in between Charlotte and Atlanta. So it's BMW's headquarters there for North America, Michelin. But so we used to flip houses all over this kind of bigger metro area. But as we bought rental properties, we really focused in on the college town of Clemson, and we kind of developed a niche of older, kind of lower rent student housing. So not the big glitzy kind of new stuff, but we would rent to grad students and foreign grad students who came here to and just were paying their own way. And we just developed a niche of renting to them. And we buy small multi-unit properties and eventually some bigger multi-unit properties. And that was kind of our long-term rental type stuff.
Got it. Okay. I think there's kind of a lot of conversation for people who maybe can't buy in their backyard about, okay, I'm going to go search for a market that I can invest in. You know, do I look for cash flow so I can have this financial independence early, or do I look for, you know, appreciation and try and, you know, build wealth that way, I guess. What is kind of, you know, your preferred strategy? Because if someone wants to retire early, they need to look for cash flow, but a lot of times I feel like these markets are kind of never appreciating at the same time, or maybe, you know, they're the $80,000 homes that look great on paper but don't necessarily you know, end up turning out very well. So what's kind of
Yeah.
some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a lot of people I've helped in other markets. So I've invested locally, but I've had a lot of students and people who listen to my podcast who are in all sorts of different situations. And there is a spectrum of types of properties and markets you can buy in. So you guys are in the upstate, you're in the Northern California. So you know all about, you know, if you buy a single family house, let's just assume you paid cash for it. You bought a lower end house for $800,000 or something, you know, in the Bay Area of California, and you rented that for $2,500 or $3,000. You know, if you just netted that out and you paid cash for it, that's going to be like a 2 or 3% return, right? It's going to be like a yield of 2 or 3%, like a 2 or 3% cap rate. That's the reality of the high price markets. And the reason everybody says, well, that doesn't cash flow is because you're going out and borrowing money at, even in the good old days, you know, 4%, 5%, or you're borrowing money at 6 or 7%. So then those numbers don't add up. Like you're making 2 or 3% with a property and you're borrowing money at 6 or 7%. That's why it doesn't cash flow, because that market, that's not what it gives you in that market. That market is an appreciating market. It's appreciated in the past because that's why the prices are higher. There's been more in demand. There's a lot of structural supply issues in California that prevent making new construction ever be able to keep up with the demand for housing. So you have that supply demand is why the long-term value of houses in California and other markets too, like Manhattan, New York, or other high-price markets, they've tended to appreciate over time. So if this is going back to the sports analogy, you just got to know the game you're playing. If you play in that arena, you're not buying for cash flow. You are buying just to pay your bills, hopefully not have negative cash flow. And then you're hoping to buy in a location that has really good demand criteria. And maybe you can buy it below value, or maybe you can force some appreciation. And so it's not making that 2 or 3% yield on the rent. It's making the growth, passive growth, is making some forced appreciation. But you just got to know that's what you're playing. And so when you go on the front end, you got to analyze the deal with that in mind. And if you're buying $800,000 starter houses, you got to have bigger down payments. You got to be willing to take bigger loans. So all that being said, like, you can make money in those markets that people do, but it's just not for a lot of people I try to help with, the small and mighty investors. That's just not really appealing to have to go, unless you're going to do a house hack or like move into the property. That's just a little bit bigger than most people can choose. So on the other end of the spectrum, you could go all the way down to the cheapest markets in the whole country, where you could buy a $30,000, $50,000 house. Those are out there. You might find them in rural areas, like way outside in the country. Get a little double wide mobile home out in the country for $30,000 and rent it for $600. They're out there. They're in South Carolina. They're in Alabama. They're in Texas. They're in all sorts of places in the Midwest. The problem is you want to find a place that has kind of a mix of those fundamentals. And people who live in the high price markets often don't realize that, hey, there's a lot of other places in this big country we call the United States where you can get both, where you can have growth and you can have cash flow. And so I think that's my recommendation in a nutshell, is that find the cities and the communities where there is a reasonable amount of cash flow, not the 2 or 3% cap rates. Maybe you find places that have 5 to 7% cap rates that you have potential, that also have long-term growth potential to where if you just held on to that property, it might make 3 or 4% per year over a 10 to 15 year period. And this is just simple math. We don't have to do crazy math in real estate. You can add 7% plus 3%, 7% from the rent, 3% from growth. That's a 10% return before we even talk about leverage and all of those other benefits of real estate. That's a winner. Like if you can buy a 10% return on leveraged property and then add some good leverage to it and double that over the next 10, 20 years, that's why you want to get into real estate. But you got to you got to build a team in that market. You got to kind of analyze that market and study it. But the main point is that they're out there. Like if you look in the South, you look in the Midwest, you looking even in smaller towns and smaller cities outside the big cities of California, it might not be 800,000. Maybe you're buying 400,000 of properties, but there are other opportunities out there.
I love it. Very well said. Thank you for that. This kind of is a good follow-up, I guess, a bridge to that. So why do you think that real estate investing is so much of a better approach for early retirement rather than like the traditional, hey, get a stock portfolio, withdraw 4% a year? That kind of tends to be the traditional FIRE analogy or equation. So why do you prefer real estate kind of over that?
Yeah. So a couple things. Like one, I don't try to force people who already have a preference for stock investing or something else into real estate, because real estate, you gotta be willing. There's a type of person who's attracted to real estate. And I have found it's usually the people who are a little bit of a control freak. So those of us who say, you know what, I don't really like sitting back in the quote passive investing and getting my dividend and waiting for things to happen. Like I want to go make things happen. Like I like the fact that I can be proactive and do something about it. So if you want to be completely hands off and not do anything, buy some index funds, right? And maybe buy some REITs or something. That's cool. Like there's nothing wrong with that. If you make $500,000 a year and all you're just trying to put your money somewhere, like there's lots of ways to do that, right? Real estate investors, number one, we're all a little bit of a control freak. We want to influence our investments a little bit with our entrepreneurship. And then part two, the benefit of that, if you're willing to take on some of that entrepreneurship up front, real estate has the benefit of being able to produce income at a much higher level than your average stock. So if you look at the S&P 500 index fund, last I looked at it, the dividend rate was 1.8%. The earnings rate, so the amount of money that companies actually earn in the S&P 500 might be like 4.5% or 5%. So they pay maybe a quarter, a third, to half of their earnings and dividends. So that's the way it is. So if you want to have $1 million of net worth and try to live off of it, you either got to sell some of your stocks or you're going to have to live off $20,000 a year, 2% of your $1 million. But if you want to buy real estate, you could buy a portfolio of real estate for $500,000 and find something that makes, let's say, so easy numbers, like a 5% return on your $500,000. That would be, say 10% return on your $500,000. You would have a $50,000 per year income. Now, can you find the 10% properties? And that's another whole conversation. But the point is, you can make a lot more income on very conservative, reasonable properties if you learn how to find them. And that could pay for your retirement. You don't have to sell your properties. You don't have to sell your stock. You might be able to get there with a lot lower net worth than you would having to go through the stock market. So I find it to be a much more approachable retirement vehicle or side hustle vehicle that you can eventually live off of than the more passive kind of stocks, bonds, traditional stuff, which is nothing wrong with that. I invest in that stuff too. But I think if you want to, I compare it to having like an income floor. You need to build this like base of your retirement plan, which is income. Like, we don't have pensions. You've got to build your own pension, start with real estate, and then you can diversify into the stocks, the bonds, the other stuff as well.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite blog posts from you is it shows the two different graphs from retiring early and slowly withdrawing from your stock portfolio. And it's like, okay, actually, my net worth is going down as I'm withdrawing from this portfolio. But with real estate, you retire early and it keeps growing, which is really cool and powerful.
I like that. So I mean, there's obviously quite a few different methods of investing in real estate. Like say short terms or multifamily. Like, do you have a preferred method?
I'm pretty agnostic in terms of, I think all of those work. I think you gotta look at your local market and just figure out what opportunities are there for you. Like in my market, small multifamily properties renting to college students was just, that's what my market gave me. But I have people I know who invest in more urban markets, and they buy single family houses and do Section 8 rentals, and they do great with that. Like that's a niche. I have a lot of people now, a lot of students are also doing short-term rentals and midterm rentals. And I think it's a combination of things. One is that because cash flow has been a little bit more difficult in a lot of markets, people have been looking for other ways to make additional cash flow. But it's also been because Airbnb and short-term rentals are a phenomenon. I think people are more likely to be mobile these days, and you have a whole population of people who are doing remote work. You have traveling nurses, you have corporate people who are just moving around a lot. So I think short-term, midterm rentals are really compelling. If you can find a property that has, long-term rental is $1,000 a month, and you can do a midterm rental for average $2,000 a month, with only a incremental smaller amount of increased expenses. Those are all they all work. The thing you've got to work back from is starting in the market where you are, where are the opportunities, and then also knowing where are you personally. So if you're somebody who's buying your first property or two, the most important thing is just getting a deal. Like you just need to do a deal or two, because you're going to learn 100 times more than you learn on this podcast. Even though this is a great podcast, I hope we're giving good information. You're going to learn 100 times more just on that first deal. And you're going to learn what's working, what's not working. You're going to talk to other investors. So I think, have all of those kind of strategies in mind, but then get out of the market, try one of them, see what works. If it doesn't work well, pivot. Like that's what we do as entrepreneurs. We pivot, we change, we adapt. You can't figure everything out in your head before you even start. You gotta get out there and do it.
Nice.
Eventually, you got to stop aiming and just pull the trigger.
Oh yeah, sure. Like Jake just did. He just bought his first rental. So
for short-term rental. Yeah.
So congratulations.
Congrats.
On that, so,
yeah, closing next week. So excited about
That's
that.
awesome.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. So once you find these deals, I found something on the MLS I think is going to work. Let's talk about maybe how to analyze a little bit. I understand that you're a super big fan of the back of the envelope approach for analyzing deals. So what does this consist of, and how does an investor decide if this is the right deal for them?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the back of the envelope approach, mainly because I've heard other experienced investors do it as well. Like in particular, Warren Buffett. I was reading, if you read his annual report every year, it's always a really good read. I remember him saying one time that if you need a computer or a calculator to tell you that you have a good deal, and he's buying billions of dollars worth of deals. These are big companies. He's like, if you need a calculator to tell you it's a good deal, it's not a good enough deal. Like a deal should be it blew my mind. I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? And what he means is that, like, it's not that a spreadsheet's bad. Like I love spreadsheets. I love using them. Calculators are great, right? You should learn to use them. But like the deal should jump off the page at you. Like you should be able to do approximate math and look at it approximately on the back of your envelope or the back of a napkin. And that if the deal looks interesting, it's probably got good merit. If you're having to like calculate down to the hundredth of a dollar to make this thing work, and you're having to change all the expenses and all that, like you're trying too hard. And so that's what back of the envelope math does. And you can look at I would break it down. And if you really want to understand how you make money in real estate, we talked about this a little bit earlier with the different markets. You make your money with the rental income, and you make your money with growing your equity. There's no, other than the tax advantages, which is a whole nother animal, which is kind of a bonus. There's really no other way to make money in real estate. You make money because you collect rent. You make money because you grow your equity. The down payment you put into the property hopefully gets bigger over time. And so the back of the envelope math is just measuring that. So from an income standpoint, you can look at things like, how much cash flow am I making? My rent minus all my expenses equals my net operating income, and then you subtract out whatever your mortgage payment is on the property. It gives you a cash flow. So you can make a goal for making a certain amount of cash flow. You can look at your cash on cash return from that. You could say, all right, I'm putting $50,000 in this property. I'm making $5,000 in cash flow per year. That's a 10% cash on cash return. You can decide, is that a good enough deal for me or not? So that's on the income side. You can do a few things like that. But on the equity side, you could look at, all right, I'm putting $50,000 into this property. How much equity am I planning? Do I think I can grow that into in the next, 5 or 10 years? And so you can look at things like, well, what if this property is worth $250,000, but I bought it for $225,000. I bought it for 10% below the full value. So I've got $25,000 in free equity today. And so instead of $50,000 down payment, I actually have an equity of $75,000 because I bought it below the full value. And so that's just, there's not complicated math. That's not like, rocket science, but those are ways to analyze both the core fundamentals of the deal and decide. And you can just decide for yourself, what's my goal? Do I want to buy a property 10% below value and have a $200 per month cash flow with a 8% cash on cash return? You can pick 2 or 3 metrics like that are your core metrics. And then you can use that to evaluate a bunch of deals until you find one that makes sense.
All right.
I'll be honest. I want to get a poster now that says if you need a calculator, it's not a good deal. So I love that.
Let's do it. Let's get a t-shirt.
Awesome. Right.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. I like it.
I know. I feel like we've had so many people come here and talk about that, but it is kind of simple. Like it should be jumping off the page. If you have to like look for the deal, you're looking too hard and you should move on. So I like that advice. That's great advice. So I know a lot of times people come on here and it's easy to talk about all the great deals you've had and how it's been going. Can we talk about like maybe your biggest failure in real estate and like what you learned from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great question. I think I would go back to 2007 and a lot of the deals I did. I think there was a sort of strategic failure that I had, and there's also some specific failures that I can talk about. But the strategic failure for me was borrowing other people's goals. Like I mentioned the whole like 10x, go big or go home kind of thing. If you listen to a podcast or you go to a seminar or you go to a class, it can be really inspiring to hear somebody say like, you want to go big, like why shouldn't you just go for it all? Like, that's great. Like it kind of picks you up, it motivates you, it makes you feel good. Like I can do that. Yeah. It challenges you. That's great. But the problem is like what we did was we went to a class and there was this lady who was flipping 50 houses per year. And we said, she's successful. Like, why don't we try to be like her? She's doing 50 houses per year. We should do a lot of volume just like her. And it wasn't that we learned how to do it. Like, here's how she bought the properties. Here's how she financed them and everything. But we forgot one thing. We forgot to say, like, why do we want to buy and flip 50 houses per year? Like, why is that important to us? Like, what are we actually trying to accomplish here? And so the strategic mistake we made was not working it backwards from our life in the first place and saying, what size business, what pace business will actually accomplish the goals that I actually want to have, like my life. Like if I want to be drinking a beer and having a good conversation with people on 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, like let's work it backwards from that. If I want to travel to Spain and have flexibility, having 100 or 1,000 properties and being a syndicator and going and having to raise money all the time, that's not going to do it. Like I don't know a lot of those people traveling. I'm not seeing them here in Spain with me traveling, hanging out. I'm seeing people who are small and mighty investors who have 10 properties and have very simple businesses and they're very flexible. And so for me, the kind of aha moment in 2007 that I try to spread to a lot of other people is if you find yourself more that the small and mighty kind of portfolio is more appealing to you, that's great. Like that, you can do that. You can accomplish all your goals that you want without getting big. You can, in fact, sometimes there's a lot of appeal and benefits to keeping it small. So that was one mistake. We got too big too fast and we had to kind of backtrack from that. And some of the specific mistakes were because we got so big so fast, we made some bad deals that we probably wouldn't have done otherwise. We were sloppy. We, just didn't analyze deals like we should have. So I think those are some kind of consequences of us not of making that big strategic mistake.
Yeah, well, failing can usually bring your biggest lessons, and it looked like you got a lot of lessons from that. So that's awesome.
Comparison is the thief of joy, and I love the small and mighty analogy because so many people do think like, oh, I need to go out and get 50,000 properties, or I need my goal is to raise $50 million and become a syndicator, and oftentimes that just leads to like you said, a lot more work and doesn't really provide the flexibility that is truly what you're looking for, right?
Yeah. So, and there's nothing wrong with doing that either. I'm not bashing the guys and gals who do that. Like, cool, but it's like know why you're doing it. Like you don't need to do that to have financial independence. If you're buying more, it's because you like being an entrepreneur, because you want to make $1 million a year, and that's just you want to buy your yacht and do all that stuff. But if you want to do that, cool, like that's fine. But just know that why you're getting into it in the first place.
Yeah, totally. So obviously we mentioned it a couple times now. What is it about Spain that you love so much, and what made you decide to go spend a year there?
So like even when I was in college, I always had that itch to travel, and I didn't get to do as much of it. I got to travel a little bit to Germany and study abroad, but so just traveling in general, foreign languages has just been a personal kind of growth thing that I really love. And so when I met my wife as a girlfriend at the time, we talked about traveling abroad and going to Latin America. And she's a Spanish teacher. That was her thing. And she traveled to Guatemala and a lot of other, to Mexico and different places. And I said, let's do it. Let's go. First chance we get. And so just ever since we met and got married, we decided to do that. And so we've traveled. In 2009, I mentioned the 4-month trip we did to South America, going to Peru. We lived in a city in Peru for a month, and then I learned to speak Spanish. Then we went to Cusco and the Machu Picchu and hiked to Machu Picchu on the Inca Trail. Went to Patagonia and the southern tip of South America. Went to Buenos Aires. So that was, kind of got me the bug for doing these little mini retirements. And then we've done other ones since then. We lived for a year and a half in 2017 with our kids. Once we had kids, our daughters were 3 and 5 years old, and we lived in Ecuador and in Cuenca, Ecuador. They went to local schools there, and they learned Spanish and became fluent, and just had a great time and a great experience. And so COVID hit after that. Once we'd already come back, and we just knew we wanted to do it again. And Spain was a place we wanted to go back to and visit. And so we picked Granada, Spain, and southern Spain. It's just a really cool, historic, small city with lots of outdoor stuff and interesting places. And it's just been a kind of another mini retirement, a chance to get away, spend time as a family, enjoy interesting cultures. I'm writing another book, so that's kind of my professional thing that I've been doing. So that's sort of the backstory of all that.
You're writing another book?
Write another one, yes.
That's awesome.
Breaking news.
Cool.
Yeah, it's breaking news. First time I actually haven't done any podcasts in a while. It's of all topics, it's going to be called The Small and Mighty Investor. It's going to be, and whereas the first book was more of a strategy book, like how do you get up the mountain and all the different strategies you can do. This one's going to be, the theory and the kind of idea of being a small and mighty investor, why you should do it. But then it's going to be, the meat of it is all tactics. So a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today, how do you find deals? How do you pick a target market? How do you analyze deals? How do you get the financing? How do you manage your properties? How do you do the bookkeeping? So it's the best I have. Everything I know, I'm trying to condense into that book on if you want to build a small and mighty real estate business as for rental properties, how do you do that? And then ultimately, how do you live off that income and produce that money to go do your version of whatever you want to do, traveling to Spain or starting a farm or doing whatever it is that matters to you. That's my goal, is to help people figure out how to do that.
Heck yeah. That's awesome.
Can't wait to read it. Well, I guess while we're on the subject, then, can you talk maybe a little bit more about your current book that's already out, your blog, your social media, and just how you're helping others through that?
Yeah, it sounds like you do some coaching too, right?
Yeah, so I do a little. I started 2009, just kind of helping people locally. We would have little mastermind groups, but eventually I learned that, hey, you can start writing and putting stuff on the internet. So I've had a blog at coachcarson.com for a long time, and that's sort of evolved over the years into a YouTube channel and a podcast that I do. I post a podcast episode every Monday, and a lot of it's very similar to the topics we've been talking about today, very focused on financial independence, on real estate investing. And I try to approach it like your little league coach, like your coach who like has a little whiteboard and draws little plays in the backyard on this back of this whiteboard. That's how I approach real estate investing. I try to break it down and make it simple, not try to get real complex with jargon. Just say, here's the way you do it. Here's the steps you can take. Let's go do it. Like, get in the huddle, ready, break. Let's go do it. So that's kind of been the backdrop of this Coach Carson thing, and started off as a hobby, but it's become it's a really big opportunity now. I've had a lot of, just to my surprise early on, like people start reading the blog, and then I had a podcast that people start listening to, and the YouTube channel has 60,000 subscribers now. So that's been really cool. Right. Just to reach other people and meet people all over the country and the world. And so it's a lot of, I have a lot of fun with it. I feel like my real estate investing is definitely a career that I'm not giving up anytime soon, but teaching and sharing and helping has been kind of my main calling. And I feel like that's something just a lot of fun. It's rather than me having 1,000 units and doing that myself, I would rather have like tens of thousands of people who all have a few properties or 10 properties, and me have like a little piece of contributing to their success. It just gives me a lot of fulfillment and fun.
Definitely. Yeah. I can tell you're a great coach. So the Coach Carson thing fits perfectly. And I love all the sports analogies and all that kind of stuff. So it all fits and ties really well. And the blog is awesome. I've watched some of the YouTube videos and stuff, and it's all great. So thanks for putting out the content and helping people just like us. So Appreciate it.
Absolutely. No, thank you. Thanks for doing your part as well. The podcasting is it takes some work behind the scenes. So everybody listening has to. I want to give you guys a pat on the back too for what you're doing and editing and putting it out into the world.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. On to our lightning round.
Yeah, I think so. You ready?
All right.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right. All right. What is your favorite beer or beverage?
I like Hefeweizen from Germany, and there's a couple of national brands like Franziskaner, but I like just going to a local town and finding whatever their local Hefeweizen brew is, and getting a really big half-liter stein full of that stuff. That's my favorite.
Have you ever been to Oktoberfest?
I've not been to Oktoberfest, believe it or not. No. I've heard it's a good time though.
Just wondering. I know you've been in Germany, so it wasn't part of the lightning round, just random.
one of these days. What is your favorite book? Can't be your own.
Yeah, no, definitely not my own. I've got a lot of favorites, but I think in the personal development realm, the first one I read out of college was a book called, actually in college, How to Think Like Leonardo da Vinci. And it was really interesting. It kind of set the stage for me, or set some standards for me of just personal development, of trying to improve yourself. And Leonardo da Vinci, of course, was a brilliant genius, artist, scientist, athlete, all sorts of things. But I've always admired kind of his that approach to being like well-rounded and studying different things and just learning for learning's sake. And it's just a cool book. It's got tons of good exercises. Like there's one particular exercise that's been helpful for me over the years, where you just sit down for 20, 30 minutes and write down whatever questions come to mind for you. Just put them on a paper, and you have to do that until you get to 100 questions. And this is a great thing to do at the beginning of the year, by the way, if this episode's coming out in the new year, and you start looking for themes and whatever your questions you're asking. And those themes are kind of the things that are important to you in your life. And you try to figure out ways to kind of live the answers to those questions. So there's lots of exercises like that, and critical thinking and personal development that are really cool in that book.
Oh, that's awesome.
That does sound cool. What is your favorite place you've visited or place you want to visit next?
Oh man, that's a tough one too. I'm going to go with, I mean, it's hard to pick a favorite, but the one that's on my mind is Argentina right now, because Argentina is in the World Cup, and I'm a big fan of, like, I have a lot of friends there too. So going to Patagonia and Argentina was just like spectacular. And my wife and I like to hike and camp, and I've never been to a place like Patagonia in southern Argentina and southern Chile. Just a big, huge vistas, big mountains, open spaces, really cool hiking and camping. So that's been a fun place.
Heck yeah. Cool. Last question.
Loaded.
A little bit loaded, and you're kind of already doing it. So what does retirement look like / mean to you?
Yeah, I think retirement is sort of a loaded word. I even, as I wrote the book, Retire Early with Real Estate, I regretted, or I wanted to find another way to say it concisely, but it's a word we use. But I think a better word for retirement is freedom, financial freedom. But even more than that, it's about having options in your life. I think I said that at the beginning. Like if you can get to a point both early in your financial independence journey and later on, where you measure the success of your journey by having greater and greater autonomy and options in your life. If you have that, then that's really the name of the game. Like having money in the bank's great. Like that's the thing that gives you the options, but that's just the tool to have the options to do what matters to you. And that's the theme of my podcast. I have a t-shirt. I'm not sure that's showing here on our screens, but do what matters is the sort of way I concisely try to explain that retirement or financial freedom is the place where you have time to do what matters to you. And that's going to change depending on where you are in your life. That's going to change on who you have in your life. If you're a parent, or if you have, loved ones you need to help out, or if you have a career, or if you have an entrepreneurship itch, or if you have a nonprofit you want to start, or if you have just anything you want to do. Like, I feel like one of the biggest challenges we have as a society is we have all this wealth and all this money, but people are working all the time and they're not that happy at it. So like what gives, so let's figure out what makes us happy. Let's figure out how to contribute. Let's figure out how to really live the life that we want to live. And then let's build everything else around that. And let's keep the first things first. Let's have fun with real estate. Let's have fun with money, but like not make that the end all be all. It's just a really cool tool. And retirement, to me, the ideal of it is that state of doing what matters and spending your time on what's important to you.
That's why I love this question, because nobody we've had on the show ever wants to retire. They all want to like just be financial freedom and just still be able to like teach others and keep kind of doing what they're doing. And I think that's a big difference is people that look at retirement as like, oh, I can sit down on the couch all day and watch TV. It's there's two different types of people in the world, and it's really fun hearing about people that they don't necessarily believe in retirement. It's just financial freedom and doing what you want to do.
And having the ability to keep the first things first. I like that. It's a good line.
That is a good one. Yeah.
I love it. Cool.
Cool. I know we kind of went over this, but one more time, where can people find you?
Yeah, it's coachcarson.com is my home online. And if you Google or YouTube search for Coach Carson, that name, that brand pretty much will show up in most places. I'm pretty active on YouTube. I'm active with my podcast, post on that every single week. And would love to hear from anybody who wants to connect. If on my website, Coach Carson, there's a free called a real estate toolkit that has a lot of just like kind of goodies, like a deal analysis sheet, a worksheet that I use to show some of that back of the envelope math, and lots of other little free goodies. So if you go to my website and look at the homepage on there, you'll find a free toolkit that'll sort of get you started if you want to check that out.
Cool.
You'll find it. You won't regret it, guys.
Great.
Right on. Well, Chad, thank you again for coming on. I've had a blast and have enjoyed getting to know your story and hear some of your tips. So thanks again for hanging out with us.
Thank you so much, Chad.
Yeah, Alec, Jacob, thanks a lot. Really enjoyed it and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man. Go out and enjoy the thunderstorm.
I will.
Maybe don't go outside.
Thunderstorms in Spain. Who would have thought, right?
All right, Alec, what did you think of our buddy Coach Carson?
Dude, Chad is the man. He kills it. I really liked his story where he was kind of forced to work on his dad's houses, and at a young age, he kind of hated real estate because of that. But then as he got older, he kind of became the middleman, fighting deals for other people, and he realized, like, hey, like I don't want a boss. I want to be my own boss, and move forward from there. And he's just never stopped moving since then, it seems like. And that's what I love. He's retired. He's writing books on teaching others to do what he's done. And I don't know, he just seems like a go-getter, and I really liked him.
Yeah, and he's living in Spain. He's
jealous,
living the dream of that time freedom and location freedom, which is really cool.
Yeah.
A couple of the big things that stood out to me. I love his kind of philosophy about the small and mighty portfolio, rather than just making this huge, 100 unit portfolio that ends up kind of sucking a lot of your time. I think when a lot of people get into real estate because, well, I guess really one of two reasons. One, to build a crap ton, a massive amount of wealth. And then there's the other side that's like, I just want some property that's going to allow me to do the things that I want when I want, And I think the small and mighty portfolio, as Chad says, is something that can provide that, Love that he talked about not comparing yourself to others, kind of involved with that idea. And then just
great advice.
Just doing what matters and keeping things first, or keeping first things first. I really enjoyed that little tidbit as well, where you want to be in a position where you can put the most important things in your life first. And sometimes it's really hard to do that when life is very demanding with, hey, you got to make money, you got to pay bills, you got to keep up with the Joneses, you got to do all these different things, when most of the times a lot of those things on that list are not your first priorities, right? Your first priorities are your family, spending time with the people that you love, doing things that you enjoy doing, passions and hobbies and all those different types of things. And oftentimes those first things get put last, and so that was powerful.
No, absolutely. And I really can't go over the fact where he said, if you need a calculator, it's not a good deal. I love that. It's true. I mean, if you're looking for a deal, it should pop out on paper. If you do have to dig in and try to find some profit, it's not worth your time.
Yep. Agreed, man. Let's make that t-shirt.
Yeah, right. We're patenting it right now. You guys can't have it.
All right, buddy. You ready to get out of here?
Yep, I'm ready to start my day.
All right. Once again, thanks for listening to the Brewbucks podcast. My name is Jacob.
And I'm Alec.
Signing off.